Good afternoon, children.
Good afternoon,
Good
ma'am.
afternoon, ma'am.
We have completed the first method or first type of pollination in the previous class, and two more types of pollination we'll be discussing. The second one is geitonogamy and the third one xenogamy. So let us see the details of these. Geitonogamy is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. So as you can see in the picture, the pollen grains are being transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. They belong to the same plant. And when we were discussing about pollination in the first period, so we just recollected what we had learned in class 10. So there, the definition given for self-pollination was transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant. Here we have learned it under two headings, autogamy and geitonogamy. In geitonogamy, the pollen grains are transferred from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. But genetically, if you see, both are types of self-pollination. Autogamy as such, it is self-pollination. This one is also, geitonogamy is also genetically self-pollination, but functionally it is cross-pollination. Functionally, in the sense that the pollen grains need to be transferred to another flower, even though it is there on the same plant, it's a different flower. So functionally, it is cross-pollination, but genetically you can say it is autogamy or self-pollination. It is functionally cross-pollination involving a pollinating agent, but genetically it is same as self-pollination or autogamy because the pollen grains belong to the same plant. The different flowers in the same plant, they'll have the same genetic genes or their genetic arrangement will be the same. So genetically you can say it is self-pollination, but functionally because here we need a pollinating agent to transfer the pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. So note it, geitonogamy is genetically self-pollination, but functionally cross-pollination. We can categorize this also under self-pollination. Pollen grains are transferred from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. So genetically you can say it is self-pollination or autogamy. Now moving on to the last one, xenogamy. So don't get confused with autogamy. Anyways, you will not have any confusion. Auto means self. And it is easy to remember. Xenogamy is cross-pollination. So see that X, it begins with X. So cross. So cross pollination. So remember it like that. So you won't have confusion with geitonogamy and xenogamy. Xenogamy, first letter X, a cross pollination. This you just assume that it is symbolizing cross pollination. In this, pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of a different plant. So if you need a little more clarity, you can say it's a transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of a different plant of the same kind. I'll repeat again, transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of a different plant of the same kind. That is cross-pollination or xenogamy. Here the pollen grains transfer from anther to the stigma of a different plant. Is it clear? Transfer of pollen grains. So I'll repeat all the three. Autogamy is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Geitonogamy is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. Whereas xenogamy is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of a different plant, but of the same kind. These are similar. Okay. This is autogamy. This is geitonogamy. Both of them are genetically autogamy or self-pollination. And this one, it is xenogamy. Okay.
Ma'am,
I'll repeat. Yes.
can you show the last slide?
Yes, I will. Just a minute. Let me complete this. Once again, I will say this one. Here the pollen grains are transferred from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of a different plant of the same kind. So in the figure which I've shown here, all the three types are being displayed. Here the first one, this one is autogamy, and from the same flower to another flower of the same plant, it is geitonogamy. And when it is taking place between two different flowers of two different plants of the same kind, you call it as xenogamy. But these two are genetically self-pollination, and this is cross-pollination. It brings genetically different pollen grains to the stigma. In autogamy and geitonogamy, genetically similar pollen grains are involved, whereas here, genetically different pollen grains, because even though these plants belong to the same species, some variations will be there. Some, because no two plants you can't say these are identical. So there'll be genetic variations, even though they belong to the same kind. These are two different plants. So it will bring genetically different pollen grains to the stigma. So moving on to the previous slide, geitonogamy, is it this one, Steffi?
Yes, ma'am.
Here the pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma of another flower, but of the same plant. Functionally, it is cross-pollination. Why do you say functionally it is cross-pollination? Because just like in cross-pollination, here we need a pollinating agent. But in terms of genes or genes transfer or the genes combining, you can say genetically it is autogamy because the flowers belong to the same plant. Pollen grains come from the same plant, so genetically identical. So they are genetically similar to autogamy, or it's the same as self-pollination in terms of the genes combining, whereas since it is involving a pollinating agent to transfer the pollen grains to the stigma, you can say functionally it is cross-pollination. The differences between these three can be asked: autogamy, xenogamy, and geitonogamy. So don't get confused between these three. Any more doubts? You want me to repeat anything? Okay. Now moving on to the next topic, agents of pollination. You know that only the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma. Pollination can take place, which will lead to fertilization. But for transferring this pollen grains to the stigma, we need some agents of pollination. There are biotic and abiotic, living and non-living agents of pollination are there, and we categorize them as abiotic agents and biotic agents. Abiotic agents include wind and water, and biotic agent animals. So wind and water are the two abiotic agents, and different animals like bees, birds, then primates, then mammals, reptiles. So there are different animals that come under the biotic agents of pollination. First, we will see the pollination carried out by wind. And wind pollinated flowers, you call as anemophilous flowers. And this process of pollination, you call it as anemophily. When wind is the pollinating or air is the pollinating agent, you call it as anemophily. And the flowers pollinated by wind, we call as anemophilous flowers. Anemophilous flowers, and this method of pollination is anemophily. And for the practicals, you need to identify flowers, the type of flowers based on the pollinating agent. One anemophilous flower, one endomophilous flower, and one ornithophilous flower you need to identify. Ornithophilous in the theory it is not there. Ornithophilous means, any guesses? Ornithology, ornithophilous. It is related to what? Which biotic agent? Salimali, ornithologist. Ornithology, ornithophilous. Birds. Okay. So ornithophily means when the pollination is carried out by birds, it is ornithophily. Then water, hydrophily, wind, anemophily, insects, endomophily. Okay, we will be learning about each one in detail. Ornithophily, you need to learn only in the practicals. The theory part it is not mentioned. So let's start with the first one, anemophily, pollination carried out by wind. This is considered to be the most common or more common abiotic agent of pollination. And wind pollinated flowers. Any flowers, depending upon their pollinating agent, they will have some adaptations to facilitate pollination. So in wind pollinated flowers also, they have some special adaptations which enable them to be easily carried away by wind. Wind pollinated flowers, they have a single ovule in each ovary. So usually they have only one ovule inside each ovary, and not only that, you can find them, these flowers forming inflorescence. Usually flowers will be smaller in size, but many of them will be packed together, will be arranged together to form a bunch. That is inflorescence, a group of flowers. So flowers will be arranged or packed together to form an inflorescence. Individual flowers may or may not be small in size, but these all are packed together to form inflorescence. Then one example for a flower or a plant where pollination is carried out by wind is cone, maize. So the cone cob, you can see the tassel, some hairy structures you might have noticed hanging out from the cone cob. Some here in the picture also you can see some yellow color, a slight yellowish color tassels, some hairy structures hanging out, and these are actually stigma and style. The hangings, the tassels, what you see are stigma and style, and you can see them waving or the moving in the air. And what is the purpose of having such feathery or hairy stigma and style? So that they can easily move in wind and they can trap the pollen grains. So when the pollen grains are transferred by the wind, if these stigma and style, if they are feathery, hairy structures, which can also sway in the wind, they can easily trap the pollen grains. So that is an adaptation shown by the maize plant. So once again, I will repeat. Pollination by wind, you call it as anemophily. Such flowers are anemophilous. And that is considered, wind is considered to be a more common abiotic agent. And these flowers pollinated by wind have some adaptations to facilitate the process. Usually they have a single ovule in each ovary and the flowers form inflorescence. One example for a flower pollinated or a plant where pollination takes place by wind is cone in cone cob. You can see the cone cob, you can see some tassels. The cone what you eat, no? So there you can find so many tassels. If you're buying fresh ones, uncooked ones, you might see some hairy structures, yellowish hairy structures arising from it. Those are actually the stigma and the style, which are very, because of being hairy structures, they'll wave or they'll move or they'll sway in the wind, and that facilitate trapping of pollen grains. And wind pollination is commonly found in grasses. So the cereal crops, as you know, they come under grass family. So corn or maize, you can include it under grass family. It's a monocot. So all the monocots, so the grasses are coming under monocot family. So wind is a pollinator in grasses. Commonly, it is found in grasses. In grasses, wind is the common pollinating agent. There are different ways by means of which effective pollination can be carried out by means of wind. So let's see what are the other adaptations shown by wind pollinated flowers for effective pollination. The flowers, they produce large amount of pollen grains. So enormous amount of pollen grains are produced by them, so that maximum number can be carried away. The pollen grains are light. Why they are light? So that they can be easily carried away. If they are heavy, it won't be that easy for the wind to carry them. So these pollen grains of such flowers will be lightweight and they'll be non-sticky. That is also very important, because if it is sticky, the wind cannot carry it to faraway places. It will get stuck to some surface, being sticky. So it's very important that it should be non-sticky, so that it won't trap on any other surface. It can be easily carried away by the wind. And they often possess well exposed stamen. Stamens are also well exposed, so that the pollens can be easily carried away by wind. Then the stigma will be large and feathery. That is also an adaptation to trap the pollen grain. So these are some of the adaptations found in anemophilous flowers. So to begin with, the first point, what we said. What is the first point? Not in this slide, previous slide.
Wind is the most abiotic, the most common abiotic agent.
No. What are the adaptations shown by the plants?
Single ovule.
Single ovule in each ovary. Normally it is found not as an adaptation, but a single ovule is found in each ovary. Then numerous flowers are packed to form inflorescence. And then we learned they produce enormous amount of pollen. They'll be lightweight and non-sticky to facilitate easy transport by wind. And they have well exposed stamens. What for? So that the pollen grains can easily disperse by wind currents. Then they have large feathery stigma. You already learned an example. The cone cob, the tassels in the cone cob, actually those are style and stigma, long and hairy or feathery, that will help in trapping the pollen grains. So how many adaptations we learned? So this you can already include in the point which is given in the next slide. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 points. 7 adaptations of anemophilous flowers we discussed, and we'll repeat it once again. All the points we'll repeat once again. So from agents of pollination, The different agents of pollination can be categorized into two, biotic and abiotic. As the name suggests, biotic are living agents, abiotic non-living agents, and wind and water are the abiotic agents. To begin with, wind pollinated flowers are anemophilous flowers, and this is considered to be a very common abiotic agent of pollination, and this acts as the main pollinating agent in grasses. And the plants or the flowers which are pollinated by wind, they show some unique features to facilitate pollination by wind. They have single ovule in their ovary, and numerous flowers group and form inflorescence. Then what is the third point? Third point, they are light and non-sticky. Then fourth, they produce large amount of pollen grains. Then what else? Large amount of pollen grains, long and feathery, stigma, then well exposed stamen. Are you remembering, children? Well exposed stamen. Then that's it. These are the 7 points. And one example is cone, the tassels in cone cope. They are hairy structures, long and hairy structures, but actually those are stigma and style. And that particular structure will help them to move in wind and trap the pollen grains. Okay, that was about anemophilous flowers. Now we'll move on to pollination by water. So before that, some of the points that we discussed about anemophilous flowers. What is anemophily, Sania?
Pollination by wind is known as anemophily.
Pollination carried out by wind is known as anemophily. What are the different features of wind pollinated flowers? Donna?
They have single ovule.
In each ovary. Okay, Michael, second point.
They have numerous flowers packed
they have-
in inflorescence.
Packed to form inflorescence. Naureen, another point.
Produce large amount of pollen.
Produce large amount of pollen. Point number 4, Punya.
Pollen grains are non-sticky.
Light and non-sticky. So 2 points you said. What are the remaining points, Evelyn? 6. Point number 6.
Stamens are well exposed
Well exposed. Why are they well exposed?
for easy transfer of the pollen grains.
By the wind currents. And the last point, Gayatri.
They have long and feathery stigma.
That also will help in what?
It's easy to percept
trap the
more.
pollen grains.
more.
And one example we mentioned, which was the example that we discussed, Malavika?
Corn cob.
What is special about that?
They have hairy structures, and these hairy structures are the stigma and style, and they trap pollen grains.
That helps in, or these structures help in trapping the pollen grains. Now we'll move on to the next pollinating agent. Punya, Vidur, Lydia, Anthony, and Rijas. Okay, let's continue. Pollination by water, you call it as hydrophily. Not aquaphily, okay, hydrophily. It is quite rare. It is quite rare. Usually we think water can be considered as the major pollinating agent, but the fact is not like that. It is a rare pollinating agent. A pollination by water is rare, and it is limited to 30 genera. And most of the plants coming under these 30 genera are monocotyledons. Just 30 genera of plants are being pollinated by water. Examples, a few examples of plants which are pollinated by water are Vallisneria, Hydrilla, Zostera. Zostera, we even call it a seagrass. Vallisneria, Hydrilla, Zostera. These are the 3 types of plants or 3 plants which are pollinated by water. As against this, water is a regular mode of transport for the male gametes among the lower plants. So the first statement, was that this method of pollination by water or hydrophily is rare, but at the same time, you should note that this is considered to be a regular mode, not rare, a regular mode of transport of male gametes in lower plants. But when it comes to higher plants, water acting as a pollinating agent is rare, but water will help in transporting male gametes in lower plants like Bryophyta, Pteridophyta. In all these lower plants, water acts as a main medium for transporting male gametes, and depending upon the presence of water, these lower plants, their distribution can get limited. You cannot find them everywhere because water can be a limiting factor, because water is very essential for the process of fertilization. If fertilization has to take place in these lower plants, male gametes should be transferred. And for the transfer of male gametes, water is very essential. So where water is completely absent or where water is scarce, you cannot find these plants. That is why I told water can be a limiting factor in the distribution of these lower plants. We'll discuss about it later. Now continuing with hydrophily, the pollen grains of most of the water pollinated species, they have got a special covering, mucilaginous covering. And why do they have such a covering? This mucilaginous covering will prevent them from getting wet. So for that, that's an adaptation shown by the pollen grains which are pollinated or which are transferred by means of water. They have got a mucilaginous covering to prevent them from getting wet. So I'll sum up the points once again. After completing anemophily, we proceeded with hydrophily. Hydrophily is the pollination carried out by water, not like water, unlike wind. This is a rare pollinating agent. When we discussed about wind, I told it's a more common agent of pollination. But unlike wind, water is a rare pollinating agent. Only 30 genera of plants are being pollinated by water, and most of them are monocots or monocotyledons. And a few examples we discussed: Vallisneria, Hydrilla, Zostera. Zostera is marine, Vallisneria and Hydrilla, both of them are freshwater, and these are pollinated by water. And even though we say water is a rarely used as a pollinating agent, water is very important for the transport of male gametes to bring about fertilization in lower plants like Bryophyta, Pteridophyta. Bryophyta, hope you are remembering the name, amphibians of the plant kingdom. Yes, Bryophyta in class 9. Anybody is remembering why Bryophyta is known as the amphibians of plant kingdom?
You need water for fertilizer.
It needs the presence of water for transporting male gametes, or else you can say for fertilization, water is must. That's why you call it as amphibians of the plant kingdom. And one adaptation shown by the pollen grains of water pollinated flowers is that they have got a mucilaginous covering to prevent them from getting wet. The distribution of bryophytes and pteridophytes is limited. Just now I told you the point. Bryophytes and pteridophytes, you can consider them as lower plants, and their distribution can be limited. Means you cannot find them growing in plenty everywhere. The distribution can get limited because they need the presence of water for transporting male gametes to bring about fertilization. It can be asked, Why the distribution of certain bryophytes and pteridophytes is limited? Because this bryophytes and pteridophytes, they need water for transporting male gametes to carry out fertilization. So if water is not there or if water is scarce in an area, there they cannot get or there they cannot flourish or there they cannot grow. Okay, that is why you consider the distribution of bryophytes and pteridophytes is limited in certain areas. Is that clear? Now moving on to one typical example of a plant where pollination takes place by water. Vallisneria. You can see different pictures of Vallisneria over here. And Vallisneria, they produce two types of flowers. You can find male flowers. Okay, male flowers are found in one plant. Female flowers also can be seen. So female flowers, you call it as pistillate flowers because only pistil is present in that flower. And staminate flower means only a stamen is present in the flower. So those two male and female flowers you can find over here. And it is, as you know, it's a freshwater plant. And let's see how pollination is taking place. The female flower, just see the position of the female flower. Female flower has got a long stalk. Female flower, with the help of a long stalk, they reaches the surface of water with the help of long stalk. They reaches the surface of the water, and the male gametes are not growing till the surface of water, but they will release their pollen grains. So they release their pollen grains, which will be transferred via water to the stigma of these flowers. And Vallisneria, you can see they are having ribbon-shaped leaves and they produce male and female flowers on different plants. And the female flower, with the help of a long stalk, it will grow till the surface of the water, and the male flower will release the pollen grains, which will be carried by the water currents to the female flower. So here you can find, this is the male flower, and here you can see the female flower. Male flower, female flower, and female flower, with the help of the stalk, they are reaching the surface of water, whereas the male flower release the pollen grains, and these pollen grains with water currents, it will be carried to the female flower and brings about pollination. I'll repeat once again. In Vallisneria, the female flowers, they can reach the surface of the water with the help of a long stalk, but male flowers, they don't grow that long, but they release their pollen grains. These pollen grains will be transferred by the water currents to the female flower, and that will result in pollination. Is it clear? Is it clear, children?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now the next example, seagrass. You can see the picture of seagrass here, and the female flowers, you can find them submerged in water. So when we discussed about Vallisneria, I told the flowers, female flowers will, with the help of a long stalk, they'll reach the surface of the water. But here the flowers remain submerged in water. But the pollen grains are long and ribbon-like. And these pollen grains, because of their peculiar appearance, as I told, they are long and ribbon-like, and that will facilitate them to be carried easily through the water, and they can reach the stigma of the flower. Flower is submerged inside. The flower as such is not on the surface. You cannot see it on the surface. It is submerged in water. But the pollen grains, they have a peculiar shape which will facilitate its easy transport through the water. The pollen grains are long and ribbon-like so that they can be easily carried by the water currents to the flower to bring about pollination. Now the next one. This is very, very important. You make mistake commonly because I think in some of the question papers also I've seen. Name the pollinating agents of plants like water hyacinth and water lily. So majority of you will write what is the pollinating agent. You know, for both plants, water is there in the beginning. The first term is water, and both of them are aquatic plants. So without a second thought, you will write water is the pollinating agent, but that is wrong. Let's see the details. All aquatic plants do not use hydrophily. A plant is aquatic. That doesn't mean that the agent of pollination is always water. In most of the aquatic plants, two typical examples are water hyacinth and water lily. Here the flowers you can see, you can see that in both these plants, the flowers will emerge above the level of water, and you can see the beautiful flowers on the surface of the water. And why these flowers are emerging on the surface? So that it can carry out anemophily or endomophily. Entomophily means when the pollination is carried out by insects, you call it as endomophily. And anemophily means when the pollination is carried out by wind, it is endomophily. I'll repeat once again. It's very, very important point. A plant is aquatic. A plant is aquatic doesn't mean that the pollinating agent is water. Not all aquatic plants use hydrophily. There are different aquatic plants. Some might depend on water as a pollinating agent, whereas there are certain other plants which do not use water as a pollinating agent. So if you are asked to write the pollinating agent of water hyacinth and water lily, you should not write it as water. In both these plants, they produce the flowers which emerge on the surface of water, so that the position of the flower will facilitate pollination by wind or animals. So the pollinating agent in water hyacinth and water lily are either insects or wind. It's not water, so you should not misunderstand and immediately seeing the terms water hyacinth, water lily. You should not write that water is the pollinating agent. Hope you have got the point, children. Yes?
Yes,
Have you
ma'am.
understood? Okay. Now, wind and water pollinated flowers. See, in case of insect pollinated flowers, they'll be brightly colored. They'll be rich in nectar. They'll have fragrance. All those are meant for attracting the insects to bring about pollination. But another peculiarity, what you find in wind and water pollinated flowers is that they won't be that colorful because they don't have to attract the insects. Here, the pollinating agents are not insects, wind and water, and they do not produce nectar. It's to be noted. You can be asked to list out the characteristic features of flowers which are pollinated by wind or water. Important to note, they don't produce nectar. Neither they produce nectar or no, they are colorful, because in case of endomophilous flowers, when the pollinating agent is an insect, definitely they'll be brightly colored and they'll store nectar in order to attract the insects to bring about pollination. If not, these two factors are not necessary. Clear, children? So we learned about different agents of pollination. We started with pollination by water. Okay. And I told you that pollination by water, it's rare and it is limited to just 30 genera, and some examples of plants where water acts as the pollinating agent are Vallisneria, Hydrilla, and Zostera. And I told you to remember that even though we say water is a rare pollinating agent, water is an important medium for the transport of male gametes in lower plants. and some adaptations of the pollen grains which are transported by means of water also we mentioned. It has got a mucilaginous covering, and the purpose of having a mucilaginous covering is to prevent it from getting wet, because the medium of transport is water. Then we learned about a few examples, Vallisneria, and I told you in Vallisneria, the female flower will reach the surface of the water with the help of a long stalk, but the male flowers are normal in size, but these male flowers will release the pollen grains which will be carried by water currents to the stigma of the female flower, bringing about pollination. Okay, and then we discussed about seagrass, where the female flowers are submerged in water, but the pollen grains will be long and ribbon-like. And because of this, these characteristic features of pollen grain will be easily transported via water to the female flower to bring about pollination. And finally, we learned about water hyacinth and water lily. Even though both of them are aquatic plants, in both cases, water is not the pollinating agent. So you should remember, you should note that all aquatic plants do not use hydrophily. Water is not the pollinating agent for all aquatic plants. There are exceptional cases, as in the case of water hyacinth and water lily. Both of them, they produce attractive flowers which will grow up to the surface, or which you can find on the surface of water, and that will facilitate it being pollinated by either by wind or insects. And another point what we learned is in wind and water pollinated flowers, they won't be that attractive by bright colors, nor they will have any nectar stored in them. Any doubt, children? Any doubt?
Ma'am, can you repeat seagrass?
Seagrass. In seagrass, in Vallisneria, we learned that the female flower will reach, with the help of the long stalk, will be reaching the surface of the water. But in seagrass, the female flower or the flowers as such will be submerged in water. But the adaptations are shown by pollen grains. Pollen grains will be long and ribbon-like. So because of this long and ribbon shape, they'll be easily transported to the flower, to the stigma of the flower to bring about pollination. Okay, Steffi?
Okay.
Yes. So now you can quickly summarize the points that we learned. We started with hydrophily. Lydia, what is hydrophily?
Pollination by water.
Pollination carried out by water is known as hydrophily. Yes, Ania, next point.
Water is only limited to 30 types of species, but it's very common in low plants like algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes.
Okay, next point, Michael. Tell me about some plants which are pollinated by water.
Water grass and
Water grass, seagrass.
seagrass.
Then seagrass, then
Seagrass, Vallisneria,
Vallisneria. One more. Seagrass, other name is Zostera. Vallisneria. What else we learned? Nandana?
Hydrilla.
Hydrilla. Michael, repeat. Three together.
Vallisneria, Hydrilla, and seagrass.
Seagrass. The other name for seagrass is Zostera. Okay, Nandana can continue. Next point. Tell me about the pollination taking place in Vallisneria.
The flowers, there are two types of flowers, male flowers and female flowers. The male flowers, the pollen grains released from the male flowers travel to the stigma of the female flowers.
What is the peculiarity of the female flower?
They have a long stalk.
Why do they have a long stalk? Why do they have a long stalk?
It reaches the surface of the water.
It facilitates them to reach the surface of the water, and the pollen grains will be transported via water to carry out pollination. Then, Gayatri, continue.
In the seagrass,
Seagrass. How
remains,
pollination takes place?
flower
Wait,
remains
what is the agent? What is the agent of pollination?
water.
Water.
The flower remains submerged in the water and the pollen grains are released in the water.
What are the peculiarities of pollen grains?
They are long and ribbon-like.
Long and ribbon-like, which will facilitate easy transport via water. Then, Malavika,
Not all aquatic plants are hydrophilic. In
means,
some
what does that mean?
plants like water lily, water hyacinth, etc., pollination by insects and wind occur.
Even though both of them are what type of plants?
Aquatic.
Aquatic plants. Water is not the pollinating agent. Instead,
Pollination by insects and pollination by wind occur.
what do you call, what is the term for pollination carried out by insects? Steffi?
Endomophily.
And when it is carried out by wind, what do you call it, Punya?
Anemophily.
Anemophily. So we learned about anemophily, hydrophily, then endomophily, even though it is not in detail, just a term we learned. And in detail we learned about anemophily and hydrophily. And next period we'll be learning about pollination brought about by biotic agents. Hope you have no other doubts. Any other doubts? Shall we wind up? Yes or no? Okay.
Yes,
See you next period, children. Thank you.
Thank you.